And we're on. Zenkahuna, Rocannon MacGregor, thank you for being on Fitness and Consciousness.
Yeah, good to be here, man.
So I think a good place to start is after you did 3 tours back to back to back in Vietnam, you said you had a friend that asked you what you were going to do when you get home, and you said, I'm just going to do whatever the fuck I want to do, or something to that effect.
Well, I don't know if I said it, quite so coarsely, but it was something like that, I'm sure. Uh, yeah, basically he said, what are you going to do? Because he and I were both getting out of the Marine Corps as soon as we went back. And I told him, I said, I want to find a way to do what I want to do, the way I want to do it, when I want to do it, how I want to do it, with whom I want to do it, and have plenty of time in my life to do whatever I want with whomever I want, have plenty of energy, have plenty of money. And he just looked at me sort of almost aghast. And the other guys that were sitting around are like, what? Everyone was pretty much like, well, how are you going to do that? I mean, nobody can do that. I mean, oh, you're going to have to work for years to get something like that. And I said, well, maybe. And I said, but that's not my intent. My intent is to go and start off doing that. Now, I realized that it might not turn out quite that way, but as it actually happened, within 5 years of my being out, and that included 6 months living in a lean-to when I first got out because I was having a hard time readjusting to civilian life and the way veterans were being treated when we got back. I was already doing the natural healing work that I wanted to be doing. So I did a number of different type jobs. I went to college for a couple of years and became a newspaper reporter. Didn't like that. I was a propane truck driver. I did all sorts of things. I tried construction work, all sorts of different things. None of it made my heart sing, and it was always just. It usually would last about 2 or 3 months until someone spoke to me rudely that was supposed to be in charge, at which point I would say something coarse to them and tell them to just get the hell out of my face, and that would be the end of work at that time. So within 5 years, I was doing the natural healing, a very comprehensive sort of a way, working with the whole person, whether it was about nutrition or herbal therapeutics or body therapy or a combination body-mind type therapy, which is eventually what it has totally morphed into over the last 44 years. So yeah, that was beginnings. And I have to say, I'm really glad I said what I said when I was still in Vietnam, and that I actually brought it into an actualized state, because it's made the last 44 years of my adult life absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I first discovered you. A buddy of mine, Ron, and we used to send each other your videos from your YouTube from, I don't know how long ago it was, maybe 7, 8 years ago or more, maybe. And
Uh, I closed my YouTube channel, my first one, about 6 or 7 years ago, and so before that, I had one for about maybe 10 years, something like that. Yeah, so that was the original Zenkahuna channel. Now it's Zenkahuna Reloaded. But yeah, okay, so that's where you first saw me.
yeah, so you were just out like all the time with your friends in nature, and you're lifting kettlebells. I could tell you had really good kettlebell technique. You had all kinds of Indian clubs of various sizes and weights. You had maces and just like all the cool toys that we were getting into, and then just this perfect uh, scenery. And so I guess just like, how did you get into that? The Indian clubs, the kettlebells, and like, how did you learn about all of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And you know how it is in life many times. If you are living the life that you want to be living, life just offers more and more opportunities for you. You get more challenges, more opportunities, more pathways open before you. And somehow, some way, I received a catalog in the mail, from snail mail. This was back in the day, and it had something about kettlebells from Dragon Door, and I thought, the hell is a kettlebell? It sounded like, you know, some kind of kitchenware or something to me. And so then I looked at it and I thought, oh, that's, you know, that's old fashioned kind of stuff. And, you know, I sort of, you know, I mean, I was into weightlifting, long distance running. I did do yoga. I was a yoga instructor actually at the time, but I was doing medical qigong a little bit also. At that time, I was still in training with that. But what happened was, you know how Dragon Door was back in the day. They just kept sending more catalogs, and so as I read some of their things, I started, you know, looking online and this, that, and the other thing. One thing led to another, and I saw a friend who had gotten a kettlebell, and I tested it. I didn't like it at all, and it was a one from Dragon Door. But I saw there was probably something to it, so I went and found a video by a woman. I don't even know her name at the time nowadays, but she had a nice way that she demonstrated like how to go through a whole workout, and you just did a follow along with her. So I did that, and naturally, you know, got the bruising on the wrists and stuff because I had no technique at all. But what that led me to was searching out, and with great luck, tapping into a guy that had a website, Iron Woody Fitness. And I like the whole idea about Iron Woody, that, you know, there was a certain play on words there about Woody. And then, of course, the old Iron Woodies, you know, he had the Woody, you know, car and stuff, and like with the surfer and that kind of thing. Anyway, but he had kettlebells. So I actually rang him up. And what that led me to was this great relationship with him. And he had medicine balls that were leather, sort of like more of the old-fashioned style looking leather one. He had stretch bands, power bands. He had sandbags of various sizes that could be loaded. I mean, all the way from, like, you know, small ones up to huge ones that, you know, take over 100, 200 pounds, whatever. So one thing led to another. We became sort of phone friends, and I was working with some veterans at the time, and between my purchasing an entire set of his kettlebells that went from 5 pounds, and by the way, I like that too, because they went up in 5 pound increments, and it was in pounds, not, you know, kilograms and all that kind of, I don't know any of that kind of stuff. I'm not European. I'm an American, you know, I mean, especially back in those days. I mean, you know, only reason I knew what a meter was because at the rifle range in the Marine Corps, you know, we shot at 200, 300 and 500 meters, you know, sort of a thing. So I was just converted that back to yards and so on and so forth. Anyway, so I got these, and what was interesting about them is later on, you know, kettlebells, they came up with the competition, you know, the pro grade competition and that sort of thing, where they're all the same size no matter what weight they were, which is great. But Iron Woody was the first guy that actually had that. His kettlebells were all the same size from 5 to 45 pounds. And it was fantastic. I mean, they were great. They also had a long enough set of arms on them so that it sat a little lower on my wrist, whereas Dragon Door sat up on my wrist. I like my kettlebells down here more. So that turned out well. I was working with veterans because, you know, a lot of guys, as we know nowadays, a lot of guys, when they come back from a war, don't do that well. So he sent me a bunch of free, empty, of course, sandbags to use with my veterans. I mean, like about 12 of them, and which I thought was an incredibly decent gesture. So I got those, and instead of filling them up with sand, I filled them up with a combination either of rice or beans, along with steel shot, like what you'd load shotgun shells with. And so it allowed me to leave more slosh in it, but still with a good weight. So that's how I got started with the kettlebells and the medicine balls and the sandbags. But the nice thing about it was I had almost, as I said, I had zero experience except for that one little DVD. And so with kettlebells, I got started with Steve Cotter's Encyclopedia of Kettlebell Lifting. And I liked his style. Showed it from the front, showed it from the side, showed it from the back. He was detailed, but no excess. Steve is a very just kind of no excess kind of guy. He just gets it done. And plus, I mean, you know, the guy's gargantuan. He's not very tall, but I mean, he's just like, you know, he's buffed and obviously knew what he was talking about. So I took that and then I started modifying immediately because that's been one of the my nature ever since I've been a kid, is to modify, customize, adapt, shift, change. I mean, anything I get pretty soon, I'm doing it my way. I've shaped it my way. I've added something to it. I've taken something away from it. So I started developing my own style, and especially because there wasn't a lot out then about kettlebells. It was pretty much to keep myself entertained. I had to come up with a lot of different things. Same thing with medicine balls, same thing with sandbags. And so that led me to, just a lot of personal creations. But at the same time, what it led me to was to find other people that were like-minded and were doing things. And so that led me down the line to Jeff Martone, Anthony DeLugio. I liked both of them because they're matter-of-fact guys, had good follow-along programs. I remember that Jeff Martone, he said two things that I really liked. He was doing something really fancy with some of his kettlebell juggling, and he dropped it and he goes, yeah, that's going to happen. You drop a kettlebell. I mean, nothing about it. Who cares, right? And then he was talking about doing movement and with a kettlebell close to your face. And he says, you want to be careful. You don't want to be spitting out chiclets. In other words, spitting your teeth out, right? But just a real, down home kind of guy. And like standing up on a 3-story building on the edge of the wall doing kettlebell juggling. I mean, the guy he looks like he's standing in the sand pit. I mean, he's, nerves of steel, right? So, but he does incredible stuff and without making a big deal about it. Anthony DeLugio, of course, had his various flow series, so to speak, of kettlebell lifting, which I enjoyed. And of course, immediately started modifying to suit my preferences, my nature, and what made my heart sing. And so from all of that, I realized that with any tool that I came up, found, that I would have to find ways to use it in ways that made sense to me, coming from my background of Kung Fu, Hapkido, and my training in the Marine Corps. All these, led into many different things. I mean, I started in martial arts and judo when I was in 5th grade, going to military school. So I never forget anything of interest to me. And so all of that just continues coming together and creating, chaos. And then we take it to cosmos, and then we go to chaos again and cosmos again. So going through iteration after iteration. And so that's how, by the time you saw me, I already had gotten a lot of gear and was already perfecting ways that I wanted to use it, especially because, as you recall, in those days, and to some degree, even in these days, a lot of the experts, the guys, oh no, this is the only way to do kettlebells, or club bells, or do Persian yoga, or this is the size of push-up board that it has to be. All these experts are ignoring the fact, matter of fact, most people around the world have done whatever in the hell they thought it was, they wanted it to, built whatever they wanted to do. I mean, let's face it, it's part of, it's not, as far as I'm concerned, it's part of being a human animal. And so that has just, obviously carried on throughout my life and everything that I do, from relating to anything else. And what it allows me to do is to create then stuff that many people have never seen. And also my intent with my first YouTube channel and now my Facebook page and my second YouTube channel is the same. I want people to know, I don't care how old or how young you are. I don't care whether you're male or female. I don't care whether you are at this moment a couch potato or an advanced world-class athlete. I've worked with all kinds of people in the last 44 years. And what I find is over and over and over again, regardless of what the person seems to be, that as soon as I start working with them, we start finding the weak links. And whether the weak link is something in their mind or something in their personality or something in their physicality, it really doesn't matter. Weak links control the chain. I mean, that's the bottom line. If you've got a weak link and you go to do something really good in some area, eventually that chain's going to break just because you've got that weak link somewhere else that you haven't, refined, you haven't corrected, right? So that's sort of how the beginning of things evolved with the first Zenkahuna channel and now into the, where I'm at today.
Yeah, well, yeah, it is funny how like these things pop into our existence when we're going a certain way. Then like that path just kind of opens up. There's obstacles, but we still get the stuff. Just a quick note while I'm thinking about it. I do the same thing too, but I don't know if you're like tapping your computer sometimes, or if there's like something beside it. But it's like I know when I hit my table. Yeah, if I like hit my table or something, it messes up the audio for a couple seconds. But it's been okay. Just like try to be careful not to like hit something, because even like paper is noisy, and it's been okay. But it just messes up for a couple seconds. But so when we were talking the other day, you were also talking about your grandma and her training with was it like Bernard McFadden, who was a pretty famous trainer in those days. So like, did you like have in your mind, like when you were like coming back from Vietnam, that you're trying to like bring that stuff back to life?
Well, no, it wasn't. It's interesting. It seems like a logical thing, but that's not actually how it happened. I had seen her old magazines, because Bernard McFadden was, amongst other things, a publisher of books and magazines, and specifically one of his greatest magazines was Physical Culture magazine. And of course, from Physical Culture, we ended up with this watered down, sports oriented sort of physical education, PE. But Bernard McFadden was about physical culture in all of its different forms. And so even though I'd seen my grandmother doing things and sometimes even participated with her, I was too young for that to make much of an influence on me in that moment. It was after I got doing all this stuff, I realized, wait a minute, this is what my grandmother was talking about. So she was right at the end of her life then. And before she moved to live with my parents, I went down in her basement and I found this treasure trove of Bernard McFadden books, Bernard McFadden magazines, physical culture magazines. And it was wonderful reading them, because I saw where what we have today grew out of. So I remember when I was a kid, I saw Strength and Health magazine, and it was all AAU stuff, Bob Hoffman. And then the IFBB started happening. And I remember the struggles in the magazines between them. So there was Strength and Health, and there was the IFBB, more of the muscle builder, Joe Weider and his brother, sort of thing. And I remember that in the AAU, you couldn't oil your body in a contest. In the IFBB, you could oil your muscles. There was all these things, sort of like old style. So, AAU guys were like John Grimmick, coming out of Pennsylvania. I mean, these guys, and they were rock solid. I mean, they were tough men. But the new guys were coming in like Larry Scott and Freddie Ortiz and Dave Draper. And then, later on, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and so on and so forth. So, I saw those beginnings, and because having had that, and then connecting in with what I found in my grandmother's basement, and then also realizing that when I was a real young, she had actually taken me with her up to where Paul Bragg, who sort of was the in between generations. So there was Bernard McFadden, then Paul Bragg, and then Jack LaLanne, for example. That sort of grew that way because each one was influenced by the one before him. And my mom had actually trained with Jack LaLanne. My grandmother had trained and knew Paul Bragg. As a matter of fact, Paul Bragg, when I was 5 years old, had me stand in his hand and pressed me over his head. And so it was one of those things. All this stuff started wait a minute, there was that. Oh yeah. So I got down in my grandmother's basement, the old Paul Bragg books. And because I already was in natural healing, I knew who Paul Bragg was. I mean, I'd already read a great many of his books, but these were his earliest works. You know, you blow the dust off them in the yellowed pages. And so here's all this stuff working together. And I realized I'm in the same tradition, because each one of them in their own way were, I want to say they were outrageous. They were ahead of their time. They stepped out of the norm. I remember seeing Jack LaLanne on his TV program that ran, for like 30 some years. And he was talking about, teaching you how to lift 10,000 pounds. And of course, as he spoke about it, what he was talking about, he said, so you pick up this 10-pound weight and this 10-pound weight, and it all adds together. In other words, he says, it doesn't matter where you start. Other ones where, he's talking about being a patriot and how it's part of our citizenship, our citizenry, to be fit, and so on and so forth. And so these are grand ideals. And to me, they were not stained and tainted with so much the advertising dollar, the way a lot of this stuff has become nowadays. And, trying to get certified, and where you can't use this because this is my intellectual property, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. The whole point of the Zenkahuna channel, my Facebook page, all of that sort of stuff is, hey, this is good, solid stuff. If you like what you see, take whatever it is that you like and use it. If you don't like it, ignore it, go someplace else. If there's some little fragment you like, you can take that. And if you find something else you like again, later on, come back and pick it up again. It doesn't matter. But it's for everybody, for all of us. And we are all potentially Bernard McFadden's, Jack LaLanne's, Paul Bragg's, so on and so forth. And what I liked about them too, now Jack LaLanne, of course, was very muscled. But if you took a look at Paul Bragg, he was just a good, solid, moderate. I mean, he had a good physique, big chest, because he's always teaching breathing exercises and that sort of thing. But they didn't, they weren't just trying to build bulk and then cut down to get ripped and then bulk up again and cut down to be ripped. I mean, they were actually talking about a natural lifestyle, or a self-healing lifestyle, is how I refer to it. And the difference for me is that if you take Bernard McFadden, for example, he had 4 or 5 daughters. And back in his day, late 1800s into the early 1930s, 40s, I think he died in 56, all of his daughters did physical fitness. And that's back when they wore the great big, kind of costumes, and they're doing handstands. There's one picture of him where he's doing a handstand, and all of his daughters are doing handstands and leaning up against him. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's ready for everybody. It's ready for everybody. It's not just for some specialist. You don't have to go to a gymnasium. You don't have to do any of that sort of stuff. And actually, that's what kettlebells and everything else first appealed to me, because I realized I was done with going to black iron gyms. I wanted to train where I wanted, when I wanted, how I wanted, and discover and create all sorts of new ways to regain a more thorough and well-rounded physique, but not just physical physique, but physical physique, mental physique, emotional physique, which I was already doing to some degree in my natural healing practices. This just added a whole nother dimension to it.
Yeah, that's quite the lineage to follow and to create your own thing, because that's like, you don't want to be just like the cassette tape that was recorded another cassette that recorded another cassette. So it's like each generation gets worse and worse. So you don't want to be just like not quite as good as Bernard McFadden, like doing his thing. You just like, you create Zenkahuna the way you want it to be, then you do that the best way that it can be, and then you can influence more people better, because you're the original copy. Yes, you took from all these different sources, but you created yourself in your own image, and then other people can see that, instead of just like, oh, you're the guy that is certified by this other guy. So you're not as good as that other guy, but you're able to like create this great way. And that's what I try to like teach people too, is like my like motto or whatever. I try to show people their own strength. I'm not trying to get them to be just like me. I'm
Right.
trying to like show them. So do you think like part of like this like freedom that you desire to do just like your way, like when you were in the military, I would imagine you didn't do anything your way. You did it their way. You had to wake up when they said, you had to eat what they said. You had to.
Now see, there's where you're mistaken, because when I got in the Marine Corps, I joined. I volunteered. I wanted to be a rifleman. I wanted to go to Vietnam. I wanted to fight. When I got in and saw it, I mean, I came from a military family. My mother and father. Well, my father was still in the Navy. My mother had served in World War II. I had uncles that fought in World War II in Korea, and my grandfather was a career soldier, fought in World War One. So I was prepared for it at that level. Plus, I'd gone to military school in the 5th grade, and believe it or not, there were so many things I learned there that made boot camp much better for me. But when I got to Vietnam, I saw, okay, now here's where I can really do things much more my way. And especially because I got into the Combined Action Forces after my first 9 months, I managed to swing myself a transfer into the Combined Action Forces, where you lived right with the Vietnamese people. You trained their militia. You lived and you fought with them right where they lived, right out in the village. And it was fantastic. It was absolutely fantastic, because the highest man in the field, the highest rank, was a sergeant. And there was only at the most 14 Americans. And then you had about 30 some Vietnamese. And usually we were down to like, 7 to 9 or 5 Americans out in the village in my outfit in the 3rd Combined Action Forces. So because we only saw an officer maybe once a week, he would come in and say, how's everything going, blah, 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 blah. Other than that, other than by radio, we didn't have contact. So as a corporal, I was, calling in airstrikes, artillery strikes, arranging ambushes, patrols, killer teams, and also leading them. And it was fantastic. I mean, we were like sort of like Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday and his brothers in Tombstone in a way. It was between us and the Viet Cong, and down there also some North Vietnamese army. They were like the cowboys. And so it was, us and them. And oftentimes, of course, as happens, the village people would get caught in between that, because, there were people there. One son was a Viet Cong and one son was fighting on our side. And so, there was all sorts of things like that. And of course, sometimes there'd be civilian injuries, or the Viet Cong would come in and execute someone who had been, supporting us as we were supporting them. So it was a very interesting process. But even in that setting, I could get away with far more being myself. And I could get away with a lot of that because I was actually also did a very good job when it came to just like straight Marine Corps type stuff. And so that's one reason why I stayed in Vietnam, because I knew that if I didn't stay in Vietnam until they were going to discharge me, I would be back in stateside Marine Corps, where it would be spit shine and rules and regulations and, high and tight haircuts and so on and so forth. And I said, I don't want to do that. I didn't join the Marine Corps to wear a good looking uniform. I loved our camouflage uniforms with our big boonie hats. And my buddy, even when I wear, a hat out in the mountains nowadays, he goes, if no one told me you'd been in Vietnam, I'd know you were in Vietnam, because you wear them like all those guys did. Got that Vietnam flip, it's flipped up in the front and flipped up in the back. And I'd never thought of it as the Vietnam flip, but it is how I wore it. So, but in the Marine Corps, I was able to, because of my unit that I was in, I was able to really merge with the people. It's where I first got exposed, actually, to natural healing. There was a village boxy, a village doctor, and he did acupuncture, cupping, gua sha, tapping. He did a form of Tai Chi Chuan. He did all sorts of things that I had no experience with at the time, but I liked him. And he spoke no English. He spoke French and Vietnamese. I spoke no French and very little Vietnamese, but somehow we related. And he was always wanting me to sit quietly. And I didn't realize that it was to calm down and be meditative at the time. But after I had done that for a few weeks, he actually started showing me techniques and so on and so forth, and correcting me. He usually corrected me by a slap on the back of the head, or just shaking his head with an absolute disgust. But that's how I actually got my start in natural healing, which at those days never did I think that's what I would do when I got out of the Marine Corps. But he planted the seeds.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I was going to ask you like where you got that. Yeah, my qigong teacher didn't really speak English, and but like his daughter was acupuncture doctor and herbal herbalist and acupuncturist, and so sometimes she would be there to translate. But yeah, he would have that same thing. He'd get like frustrated with me. Apparently, I don't know what a 45-degree angle is. He'd draw it. He'd draw it on a piece of paper. He'd draw off like whatever angle I was doing, 42, 39, 47. He'd make that angle and cross it out, make a 45-degree angle, and then, but apparently it was very difficult for me to figure out the 45-degree angles. Apparently it's extremely important. But yeah, it's something about like when someone doesn't speak the same language, but you can still, I don't know, maybe you can even like learn better in some ways. But so when you, did you like after that, like when you came back to the States, did you start, did you start like going to school for this, for the more like the energy healing and?
Well, no, not initially. As I said, at first, I lived in a lean-to for 6 months that I built out in Wolf Creek, Arizona, from fallen wood, fallen trees, and lived out there to just bring myself back to living in the States and work out some of the PTSD that I had, which of course nobody knew anything about it. I didn't know. I just thought I was crazy. Mm. And of course I was to a large degree. But slowly, I got back into martial arts, of course, and I had some good instructors in that. What eventually led me to this was I haven't watched television since I joined the Marine Corps in 1967. I was married for a while, and my wife begged me. She begged me, could we please have a television? So I went out and I bought a little television, a little portable, little small screen. This was back in the, I got a black and white one. It was a while back. So I said, you can watch 1 hour a week. And, she's just shaking her head, right? So the first week, she goes to turn on. I said, oh, I forgot to tell you, it has to be an educational program. So at the time we had an educational channel out here on television. I turned it to that. I think it was channel 34. And there was this chiropractor on there doing this thing called Touch for Health Kinesiology. And I'm watching it. And I come from a very scientific background. My mother, highly educated woman, very rational, very logical. Science was important to her. And it had always been to me. But this guy was doing this odd looking stuff like muscle testing, he called it. And I'm going, what? And then he's correcting it with, rub here and touch there and run a meridian here and hold a neurovascular point there. And I'm like, what? And my wife's going, can't we turn on something else, with commercials? I said, no, especially we're not going to anything with commercials, right? So anyway, I watched that hour. I found his book. I found that his facility was 20 minutes away from where I lived. I went over there. I spent 4.5 hours talking with his people. I got involved in that training. It blew my mind. I could not believe what I was experiencing. I couldn't believe what I was able to do with my friends and people in the martial arts. I was taking Taekwondo at the time. And you get some injuries. Well, I'd take these guys as soon as they were injured, and I start doing this stuff, and they're going, "What the hell is that?" And and then they would feel better. They would heal more quickly, and so on and so forth. I'm like, man, this stuff is amazing. What is all this stuff? And I am a researcher, always have been. I get on track of something, and I don't stop until I've gotten down to the bottom of it. So I found these old time chiropractors, naturopaths, osteopaths, foot reflexologists. But I mean, these were guys that were in practice wearing like white lab coats, doing foot reflexology, old style, deep into the feet. You go and get a session with these guys and you're pissing brown the next day because it released so many toxins into your bloodstream. I mean, they were incredible. And each one was sort of a segue to something else. And I found this Dr. Randolph Stone, a friend of mine, a chiropractic student, gave me his all of his books. I read for about 30 minutes in one of his books, and I realized I didn't understand one thing he'd said, not one thing. If you'd said, "What did you just read?" I couldn't have told you. I read all 5 of his major works, came back, read them again, underlined them, took what I'd underlined, typed it out on an old Underwood typewriter that my mom had had when she went to college. Took what I had typed out, read that, then reread all the books again. By the time I was done with that, and I was also putting it into practice, working with my very earliest day clients, if you will, who were already starting to pay me. That led me to a friend of mine said, "Hey, I just heard about this place. It's up on an island off the coast of Washington State. And they're super intense. And everybody tells me, for God's sake, don't go there." And I said, "Whoa, wait a minute, super intense. This Dr. Stone cat was super intense. Let me check them out." So I called them, we talked. It was a love-hate relationship right from the very beginning. I went up there and trained for 17 weeks, 7 days a week. You lived in Dobay Village. The whole village was their facility. We were on the island. I never left the island. Some people on the weekends would go into Seattle. Not me. I stayed there working with people. Within 2 weeks, I was working on staff members. I had a knack. It was like I'd read those books. I'd absorbed those books so thoroughly, been practicing, all the time, that when I got up there, it was just filling in the nooks and crannies that I didn't quite understand, or helping me refine, put a sharper edge in my blade. And I mean, incredible things happened there, because a lot of people that went there, they said it was the most incredible training they ever had. Because first of all, there was a lot of us that were older. Now, I wasn't one of them. I turned 28 when I was there. So I'd been in practice since I was 25. And I turned 28 when I was there, but there were people that were in their 40s and 50s. There were people that had quit. 2 of them were married couples that had law practices. They quit their law practices to come up and learn polarity therapy, and that's how they intended to make their living. And both of them were $1 million plus a year lawyers at the time. So it was a very diverse, unique group and of characters. There was a guy that named Wolf that had a sound studio in Seattle. Lots of interesting cats. And so the training, it started early, it went late. You could run on pontoons right out into the San Juan de Fuca Straits and leap right off into the ocean, which was cold. And we had an awesome storm that just like destroyed all the pontoons. These were big 12 by 12 pontoons, and like with 2 by 12 timbers stacked on top that had been there for years, that turned them into splinters. It was amazing. And matter of fact, on that evening, I walked out on the rocks where the waves were crashing, and I was yelling up to the Viking gods. I was yelling, "Wotan! Odin! Thor!" Because it was so obvious, a Viking moment, right? And when I came back in off the rocks, there was this person in a poncho, and there was lights, from the village there. I could see her. I could see the person, and it turns out to be one of my staff people that was training me. And she goes, "What in the hell are you doing? You could have died out there." And I said, "Yeah, but I didn't." And so, it was that kind of a time. And so a lot of us were there to really transform our lives. There was a woman, 55 years old. When she got there, we had to help her off of the bus to get off the bus. She had arthritis so bad, she couldn't get off by herself. 7 weeks later, for the first time, she was able to hold her grandchildren, pick them up in her arms. They came to see her graduate. It was amazing. And I'll tell you part of what happened with her, because it's a good story. We were out on the pontoon bridge prior to the storm, the pontoons, and in the ocean there. And she wanted to go into the ocean. She just did a sauna, and she wanted to do hot and cold, right? But with her arthritis was still really bad at the time. It's only about 3 weeks in. And she wanted to get into that icy cold water, but she just couldn't force herself to jump in. And so there was some other women and some other male students around, and they're saying, oh, why don't you try a little bit at a time, just your foot, blah, 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 blah. And so I was listening to this out of the corner of my ear, and finally it just aggravated me. I went over to her and I said, Gloria, do you need help getting into the ocean? She goes, I do. Well, I just took her by the shoulders and threw her in. And so she sunk like a rock. And then she came up like an orca whale, whew. I mean, she shot up about halfway out of the water, like about to waist, screaming, by the way, sunk down again, went down like a rock, whew, back up again as soon as she hit the bottom. She's shooting herself back up. On about the third or fourth time up, I grabbed her by the arms and drug her up by her arms. Now, arthritis in her shoulders, arthritis in her elbows, arthritis in her wrists and her fingers, right? And everyone's going, oh my God. They thought I'd killed the woman. And I forgot to mention that in the Marine Corps, my nickname was Mad Dog. Because when I fought, I went into a real berserker kind of a rage. And I screamed and hollered and cussed and so on and so forth. So I was still going by that name a lot. And they said, Mad Dog, that's just too much. I mean, you've gone too far now. You've hurt her, blah, 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 blah. And they're, especially 3 of these staff people who were doing that. And all of a sudden, Gloria says, shut up, shut up. He's the only one that helped me do what I wanted to do. Mm. And so that began a love affair between this woman and I. I worked on her at least one session every day. We went in and did in polarity therapy, there's a thing called Tomasic work. And it's defined as deep, penetrating, scattering, painful, eliciting a definite reaction from the resisting action of the negative pole and thus drawing it into balance. And that's what we did a lot of. And between that and purifying food program, hot and colds, all the other things that we did going into the psycho-emotional aspect of it with polarity of awareness, this woman transformed her life. It was absolutely amazing to see it happening before my eyes. And she only did the first 7 weeks of the training. She didn't do the advanced work. But when she left, to see her being able to hold her grandchildren in her arms and get in and out of their vehicle without any assistance at all. And actually, she had started to run, not very fast, but she was out doing about 1 mile to 1.5 miles a day on the roads. So, I mean, great story, and it really was powerful to see that, and other stories similar to that and during those 17 weeks where I saw this. It's not explained through Western science. Of course, it's explained much more by Western science now, but it's explained by Ayurvedic science. It's explained by Chinese medical science and from the old days. And that gave me the fortitude, if you will, to face all of the conflicts, especially when I started way back when, 44 years ago. We were facing a lot of flack from MDs, even from chiropractors. Anybody that started getting afraid that we were taking a slice of their pie, here, come in every day, here, no, you got to take these medications. Oh, now you got to do this, now you got to do that. So it was a very interesting, process for me going to that training. And that's, of course, what led me to then California Acupuncture College and Emperor's College of Traditional Oriental Medicine, and to structural integration training and Feldenkrais and Alexander technique and all these different things. But I always used what's called the understanding, coming from polarity therapy, which incorporates the Ayurvedic and the Chinese medicine, really, because they're just different maps of the same territory. And the bottom line is that when I what we call play out or anything else, it is excellent. By the way, are we having trouble with the connection?
Just for a second, but it's fine now.
Okay. So as I apply that understanding throughout my life across the board, as I teach that to people that come to me, to the degree that they apply it, it gives us a roadmap of how to handle and how to face the various challenges that life's going to throw at us. Because let's face it, there's all kinds of surprises, right? And so, you know, that's part of why I do the work that I do. Because people said to me many times, well, you know, you're a former Marine, you were never a hippie. Here you're doing this natural healing, and you're talking about, you know, subtle energy, and you teach yoga and qigong, and now this primal nature play that you created, and you're doing all this stuff, and it just, I mean, how's a guy like you, why are you doing this? And I said, because this stuff is too authentic, it's too real to only be done by people wearing spandex. It's too powerful, it's too potent by only being done by people that always talk to you with a voice that sounds like this, and feel the energy flow through your body. You know, I get in there, and yeah, you know, anybody that's trained with me knows this. First of all, no one's ever claimed I'm patient, all right? I'm bulldog, I'll never give up on you. But I'm a stickler, and I'm particular about things. And when it's wrong, and I teach get right quick. And you can't get right quick if I don't tell you that you're doing it wrong, and if I don't show you what right looks like, what right feels like. So all of this fits together in this, again, this ongoing continuum of aliveness, and it needs to be presented by more than just somebody, for example, that's airy-fairy that way, crystal crunchers. Hey, I use crystals, I use you know gem therapy, I use tuning forks, but when I do it, it works. I've had people that say to me, oh yeah, I've had that didn't work for me. So, well, let's see when I do it if it works for you. If it doesn't, no charge. And they go, that's not how anybody's ever done it with me. And over and over again, because I don't do it like other people. I do it always based on the understanding and the person in front of me, their energy in this moment. What is it they need? If it's a kick in the ass, we do a kick in the ass. If it's a hug, we do a hug. If it's movement, we do movement. If it's hands-on work, if it's changing the nutrition, whatever it is, that's what we do. So I used my entire background, including the Marine Corps, to create what I do now. And you'll find people who say, yes, but he's the gentlest man in the world. I'm the gentlest man in the world and the most dangerous man in the world. Basically, you know what that makes me? An average human being. Because really, as human animals, we are the greatest predators on the planet. One of the reasons we've killed so much on the planet, in my estimation, is because we spent so many hundreds of thousands of years not being hunters and gatherers, but being the hunted, right? I mean, we didn't have the fangs, we didn't have the speed, we didn't have the claws, we didn't have any of that kind of stuff. So what we need is to recognize that as human animals, we've paid back every animal on the planet, and ones that didn't even deserve it. We take you out. You're a mosquito or you're a buffalo, it doesn't matter. You get in the way, we take you out. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is not the discussion right now. It's just to recognize we're human beings, human animals, and we have the same needs, and we work a lot with survival issues, right? And so I teach, you got to survive first to thrive. But most people get stuck in survival mode. So no matter how wealthy or wise they become, they forget that now they're thriving. They're still stuck in survival. So one of the things I do in my work, for example, whether it's with movement or any other aspect, is let's get into the thriving. Let's get into the appreciation, the recognition, the acknowledgement of the good, the great, the grand, the glorious, because that's what takes us up to that next evolutionary iteration of personal evolution, not evolving as a species, but as an individual.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You've had all these different sources of information, and something that I got my first yoga books when I was 15 years old at a Grateful Dead concert, and it was 1994, and it was like a Krishna consciousness stuff. It wasn't like up dog, down dog. It was different. But then, so as I'm like learning about this stuff, I could tell by the paintings in the book that it was true. That because you can't make those paintings if you don't know how it is. Like that's just the way I saw it. You can't do that if you don't know how it is. But so as I like learn, I read all these different yoga books, hundreds of yoga books, qigong, Indian stuff, Chinese, Japanese, all these different things. And I was like, okay, it seems like some of them are just pretty much copies of the others. It's like here's the and but then I like some of them are like a little bit different. And then so I was like wondering, okay, like with the chakra system, and I was thinking, okay, well, I've had some experiences myself. I've seen the Sahasrara in a dream state. It was pretty real to me. I mean, maybe it was not real, but to me it was real. I saw it. It only happened one time in this particular way. I've had like an experience like with the Soma chakra, which is one that's not hardly ever talked about. But
you're right.
And a couple other things. So sometimes when I'm reading these books, and it's like, I don't know that that's right. They're like the 7 chakras, they're aligned this way up the spine. Okay, maybe. But then it seems like a lot of maybe just saying that because that's what somebody else said. Oh, this Indian guy. Wow, it must be true because he has his leg behind his head. He must be a real spiritual guy. So when you're like in your experiences, like what's your view of like, we were talking about the meridians. So like, have you found that like one thing that I heard you say that was interesting was different maps of the same territory. That really spoke to me. That was saying a lot. But so I guess that's kind of my question is, so like when somebody's like, I guess, could you describe the chakra system as you see it, or the meridian system as your experience, compared to what is commonly written in the books? I go get the chakra book from the library, I read it. Do you think that that's the way it is, or is your experience something different?
Right. Well, that's a good question. And of course, we could spend the next few years going into that in detail. But in a nutshell, let me say this. It's certainly, when I started off, I had my first yoga book when I was 9 years old. My mom gave it to me. It was called Yoga for Americans by Indra Devi. She had a place down in Takati, down south from us. We went down there, trained with her. It was very interesting. I never thought I was ever going to, be a yogi or anything like that, or teach yoga, but I liked it. Put a lot of it into practice. My mom got me books on hypnotherapy, self-hypnosis. She got me a great book that's still out and about, and millions and millions of people have used it. The Psycho-Cybernetics book by Maltz, which is still a very solid book and valuable. Here's what I found. These days, there's people that have read somebody else's book, who's 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 read somebody else's book, and it's just said the same thing over and over and over and over again. And generally, there's a little something lost with each one, or they try and put in some artificial or irrelevant, variation that, functionally makes absolutely no difference at all. Another thing is that, I've had this discussion many times with different people. And so somebody uses the chakra system and somebody uses meridians. And somebody that's really hardcore about one and hardcore about the other, But what I noticed is that as I have gone deeper and deeper into it, and so when you understand in Chinese medicine the three dantians, and you realize that there aren't just three dantians, there are three major, most used dantians, but there's also the underarm dantians. There's all sorts of different dantians. It's the same thing with chakras. I mean, there are numerous chakras. If you want to let's consider that a chakra is an energy gate. Let's consider that what's called an acupuncture point. I mean, acupuncture point. I mean, come on. We couldn't do it with something else? Well, of course you can. It's not an acupuncture point. It's a chi gate point or an energy gate, right? And so there are some energy gates at certain times of the day, the year, or with the person that's going to be more significant than another gate. And what I teach is get inside the damn garden. It doesn't matter what gate you go through. It doesn't matter whether you call it a chakra or a meridian or acupuncture point or a shiatsu point or subo. It doesn't matter the language that you're using. I mean, you find people, when they teach yoga, they say, okay, now we're going to do the yaya waba waba yaki. And I said, can't we just call it the crocodile? I mean, that's what that translates to. I mean, chaturanga, crocodile. I mean, it's simple, right? There are some things that where the word, just because it's become so familiar now, like chaturanga is pretty familiar. But I mean, I prefer calling things up dog, down dog. Most everybody around that's into any of this at all, even superficially, has heard of up dog and down dog because it's so similar to like dive bomber push-ups and things like that. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So when I'm working with a person, it's just like if I'm, depending on what my intent is with looking at a map. If I want to know the industrial distribution geographically of the United States, I'm going to look at that sort of map. If I want to know the topography, I'm going to look at a topographical map. If I want to know the climatic variations, the weather variations, I'm going to look at that type of a map. So the key is to use the right map at the right time and to be able to shift effortlessly and seamlessly between the different mappings. And also be ready to get off the map totally, right? To go with exactly what's happening in the moment with the person you're with right then. I never let any map interfere with the person in front of me. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. The map is never the thing. It's a representation of the thing. The person is the thing, right? So if according to Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, Shiatsu, Kiatsu, Joe Ray, Rolfing, Feldenkrais, Alexander method, regardless of what somebody else would think that you would do with it, if in this moment something totally different is called for, that's what I do, right? I don't let myself be held by, captive by the map or by the language or by the ecosystem. I don't care whether a person is certified. On my wall, you see photos of me and my students and my friends and my training partners. Why? We're the living fact of the thing. So, who did I train with? I trained with very few people. As a matter of fact, I don't want to mention the name because I think he's a good man. But in kettlebells, I paid this guy to come out to the rancho, paid him $1,500 to come out and do a day with us in kettlebells. I love this guy. I learned a lot from videos. But when he came out, he did not respond at all to the people that were in front of him. Midway through, I said, look, I'm totally dissatisfied with what you're doing. You got to respond to the people in front of you. And plus, he wasn't giving any corrections, right? He'd say, oh, no, that's fine. That's good for now. Well, by the end of the day, he said to me, well, he said, I hope you have me come back up again. I enjoyed, training with your people and you get another group. And I was just shaking my head to myself. I couldn't believe he thought I'd have him come up again. I'd never have him come up again because he didn't pay attention to the people themselves. He had shifted from the original way he trained in kettlebells to more of the Girovoy sport kettlebell. And my people weren't those people. And I had told him before he came, I gave him detailed explanations about each of the people that were going to be in the work so he'd know who would be coming to train. He's a one-trick pony. He's got a way that he does it, and that's how he does it, right? So that didn't work for me. And you know what I ended up doing? I gave those same people that had paid for this, I gave them the same number of hours that they had paid for with me for free, to undo some of the mistaken ideas they'd gotten from him that didn't actually work for them individually. So I don't care who you trained with. I don't care if you trained with anybody. I don't care if you trained with everybody. A certificate, what is a certificate? How long does it take to master something? I've been doing this for 44 years. I don't consider myself a master of it. Its mastery is something that's ongoing. Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh said that once you become enlightened, then the work really begins. You know, it's like when you get your first degree black belt. When I got my first degree black belt, I got it. Oh, okay, I can start to learn something now. Up until then, I didn't know anything. And I realized that as a first degree black belt, I knew a little less than when I began. And that was the good news. Because life is a mystery to be lived, to be adored, to be explored, to be investigated, to be shaped and shifted, and be shifted and shaped by it. I mean, that's what we're talking about. So, you know, one of the things I always tell people about primal nature play, you never have to worry. You will never be certified in primal nature play, because there's never going to be a certification from me as a certified primal nature play practitioner. Out of the question. Why? Because everybody on the planet can be a player. I mean, the whole world is our playground. It's our place to get out and romp and stomp. And I don't care what a person does. I don't care if they use 2 cans of chili beans to start doing movements and stuff. I don't care if they pick up a rock. I don't care what they're doing. Get moving. And if you do what you love to do, I think I told you the other day when we were just talking, people say, hey, Zenkahuna, ZK, you're disciplined, man. It's awesome. You train every single day. And I go, no. There's no discipline involved here. It's blisscipline. I like what I do so much. It's practically, functionally impossible for me not to do it. I don't care. You know, there are days when I get up, I don't feel like moving first thing in the morning, 5:30 in the morning. But I know, without a doubt, if I start one movement, before I've done more than a few repetitions of it, I'll be starting to feel better. And then I take the next one, and the next move, and the next move, and the next move, and I turn it into a flow and this creative project. And by the time I'm done, I'm lucky if I can stop at an hour or 40 minutes. You know, if I've got the time, I'll go 2 hours, 3 hours. Sometimes when the Buffalo Thief and Coach Tar and I are doing our nature play together, like on a Sunday or a Saturday, or when we're on road trips or on holidays, we'll go 3, 4, 5 hours nonstop. I mean, blisscipline, not discipline, is my way. You can make it your way if you like, and then you know what? It'll be your way. If you've got another way, that's okay too.
Yeah, you all definitely look like you're having a lot of fun and good technique. And yeah, I know what you mean by just like, you don't really feel like it. Okay, I'm going to do just 5 minutes. And then you get into it, 10, 15, hour goes by, you're still having fun. We used to do that a lot more often. When I had this other house, my buddies would come over and we just drag all the iron and steel out in the backyard and throw it around and train martial arts. And we're throwing kettlebells around and lifting stuff and climbing the rope and all kinds of, and just several hours go by and it's just fun. So,
yeah,
there's something I was gonna.
I have something for you. I want to talk about for just a second. You've mentioned technique a couple of times, and good technique and bad technique. I mean, there's no question that there are better and worse ways, generally speaking, to do some of these things. But I also consider it misleading to people to think that there's only one good technique or one way to, whether it's a club bell, a steel club, a short club, a long club, a mace, a kettlebell, a sandbag. There are many ways that as human animals, we can use this equipment safely, intelligently, and according also to who we are and what we're doing and what our outcome is. I mean, if I'm going to train somebody that wants to go into a Spartan competition or one of these Viking competitions or mud wrestling, whatever it might be. I'm going to train them for what they're doing. And so what I show them, the technique might be totally different. Somebody else wants to come in and learn, have a much greater diversity in their training possibilities. So we're going to do something like that. Coach Tar here about 2 years ago had a woman who was trying out for the Olympics. She was a fencer. Well, so what can you imagine right off the bat, unless it's a very unique fencer? She's going to be one-sided, right? Fencing. Most people only fence with one side, especially if they're the kind of people that have gotten so good that they're, up for, consideration in the Olympics. They're not going to train with both sides because it would take longer to get good, right? Yeah. So, they're not D'Artagnan who might use two swords, right? So we know that one of the things we're going to probably have to do is help her to neurologically begin to connect with the opposite side. In her case, it would be the left hand was a non-dominant hand. And not so much with her fencing, you understand, but simply to get that part of her engaged so that we can actually get a full core experience. Core is highly used these days. Most people couldn't find their core with a search warrant, a bloodhound, and a spy satellite. But anyway, by doing that, she immediately, she didn't live out here. She had to, fly out here and train with Coach Tar for a few days, and then she'd fly home. They would talk online and share some video back and forth, and she'd come back out again. That's what we have to do with people. We have to take them as they are, see where they've got the weak links or parasites, as we call them lots of times, and help them to recognize the parasite and get rid of the parasite, right? So technique, it's variable. People say, well, somebody sees something, they think I do hard style. Somebody sees something and they think I do soft style. I do soft, hard, in between, no style at all. I don't know. I don't know if these people ever read Bruce Lee, for God's sake, right? In his Jeet Kune Do. Style of no style. And of course, a lot of people, they just do that as a way to be sloppy. Well, I'm not talking about that. Yeah. But I will say that for a guy who's trained every day, every single day for almost 13 years now, and who I trained almost every day even before that, but certainly in these last 12 plus years, without any significant injuries. Sometimes you get a little pull or you get a little sore somewhere or something like that. And be doing that, and I'm 69 years old, I guess my technique is pretty good. I guess my way is pretty good. Since, only once since I was 20 years old have I ever been treated by a doctor. And that was one time. And that one time didn't work. I just went on with my natural practices and that worked. All right. So I don't even take an aspirin, an Advil. I don't even know what all these other, things are. I suggest to people, don't get caught by paper, by certifications, by licensing, by this. The real bottom line is, can this person help me now with this thing that I'm interested in? Can this person assist me in my process of living my life better in a significant way, right? And how am I doing with that? I have people that have come to me. My oldest client, I've been doing it for 40 years. She's been coming for 42 years. She's 94 years old. Right? Wow. I've been with people 30, 35, 15, 18, 19 years. The vast majority of my people come and stay a long time. Not because they have to, not because they need me, but because they like lifelong learning. And because I'm so multidimensional, I teach so many different avenues and possibilities and levels, and they can go through so many different iterations to constantly improve their life. I've got one woman right now. She's from the African community, which is unusual for many of those people to step outside of their community to go to something especially as unusual and unorthodox as what I do. But in the last 12 years or so, her husband, her son, her daughter, her mother, her father, they've all benefited from what she's learned here and what she's introduced to them. I mean, it's just amazing to see this whole family shifting focuses in so many different ways from what she learned and bringing it to her family. Not just keeping it for herself, but again, sharing it as she knew it. And at one point she said to me, I just feel like I should get some piece of paper so I can show people I know. And I said, so long as you need a piece of paper to show people that you know something, you don't know anything, right? I said, you actually know more than most people that have a piece of paper. How many people train regularly, every week? She came to every transformational weekend that I taught. She's done that right along, right? She put it into practice every single day. You can practice an hour a day, or you can put it into practice so it's across your life. Those are the kind of people that I would rather go and learn from, regardless of whether or not they have a piece of paper or a degree or anything even vaguely like that. I don't care about that. My thing is, does what you have work well for me?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
So I'm getting a little feedback from myself. Okay, now it's not. I was recently decided. I had some things change, but I had decided to let my Strong First certification expire. I was a Strong First kettlebell instructor for 4 years, and it wasn't all that I did, but it was. I knew it was a very difficult test, and if I did take that, it meant that I at least had this level of understanding, level of fitness. So it's like it's not that it didn't mean anything. It meant something. It meant that I could do that. Sure. But then I decided to let it go. And then I was thinking about do my own certification or something like that. And then I recently had, which we're not quite unveiling yet. It's next week. I told you about this partnership I have with my new gym. And then it was like, okay, now I see, I think I'm going to get certified through him. And he's like, kind of in an interesting situation himself. I can't say who it is yet. By the time most people hear this, it'll already be out there. But for the moment, he was kind of saying the same thing. He's like, what's a certification? And I don't want to say who it is, like I said, but he's somebody that's been around a long time at a high level. I'll put it that way. And he has certified people before. But now he was thinking like, we're doing that again, but it's kind of like changing some things around because he's saying the same thing. What's a certification? What's it mean? How long does it take to get it? How long do you have to study to get it? You come to like you come for the weekend and you can get a certification. He's like, what's that mean? Yeah. So at that level, you know who I'm talking about, but so even at that level, it's like they're going through the same thing in their mind. So the people that want to be genuine, high level, that at that level, they're rethinking what it means. So something.
Well, I mean,
go ahead. Were you saying something?
Well, I was just going to say that if you take into consideration, I mean, can you imagine somebody saying to Kit Carson, "Well, who certified you as a scout?" See, the real key is you want to recognize, hey, Kit Carson lives in New Mexico. He's done this. He knows the Navajo Indians. I mean, when you find out about him, you realize, yeah, this is the guy that I want doing it with me. It's the same thing. If you, can you imagine? So Wyatt Earp, all right, but who's Morgan Earp? And who's, Virgil Earp, and so on and so forth. And Doc Holliday, he was a dentist, that sort of thing. This stuff has just gotten insane. I remember when, this whole thing about people that they're in this organization and this organization, and it all just breaks down to, let's take aerobic instructors, right? You can find a good one and you can find a bad one, and they'll have exactly the same certification. Not only that, the one you think is bad has 35 people in his or her class, and those people think she's wonderful, right? So what I'm saying is, I don't say you shouldn't get trained. I don't say you shouldn't. But what I'm saying is, if you think a piece of paper, or if I do it different than what you're piece of paper tells you to be done. And so you want to make me wrong for that? Uh, for me, you're just stepping over the boundaries of intelligence,
Mm.
right? And sounding like, a
Okay, we're back on. I hit pause. So yeah,
yeah.
you were saying
Okay.
like the,
What I was saying is that you can take someone who a lot of students like that has a certification and other people don't like. Well, so what's it's not about the certification. It's about these people like this person and others don't. I mean, I have people come to me. I'm very careful about the people that I train in anything. They come to me.
all right, we're back on. Yeah, sorry about that. It's like
That's
starting to
okay.
freeze up a little bit. Yeah, so you're like
Yeah,
saying like
but
with the like certifications, and you're talking about Doc Holliday being a dentist. It's like then it just means he had a pair of pliers, right? Isn't that pretty much all that? It's like in those days, that's pretty much what it meant. Here's a guy that can.
well, I'll tell you, I've actually seen at the Rancho. We had a complete set of dental tools from the 1860s. And if you take a look at those tools and what they're using today, many of them are practically identical. It's amazing. Now they've got more sophisticated stuff now, and high-speed drills and things. But it's amazing how many things in dentistry are still the same. Because there's some things that just work, right? I mean, it's like it's sort of like with belief systems, Ryan. I always tell people, they say, "Do you believe in energy?" And I say, "No, I don't believe in energy. I don't believe in the sun. I see the sun, I feel energy, I've seen the results of work that I do." For example, people say, "Well, I guess I don't like to believe in things." Well, you don't have to believe in what I do. It either works or it doesn't. If it works, you don't need to believe it because it worked. If it doesn't work, well, then you certainly wouldn't want to believe it. So, I mean, like, we can take belief out of it. I always point out, if I take my 45 pistol and you don't believe that if I shoot you, it will hurt, well, I can test that, right?
Mm.
And I don't care how strong your belief is. That 45, when it penetrates your body and shocks every organ, that's going to hurt, no matter what your belief was. By the same token, uh, you can fool yourself into believing things. Oh, I have people, again, I won't mention the religion, but they don't believe in going to doctors. And some people think I don't believe in going to medical doctors. It's not that I don't believe in going to medical doctors. I just don't go to a medical doctor or a chiropractor or an osteopath or any other kind of practitioner unless I have something that I want assistance with. And I think they have a skill, a technique, an understanding that will help me. So if my arm's ever torn off, I'm going for trauma surgery. You understand me?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also going to get the hell out of the hospital as fast as I can so I don't contract 17 other miserable diseases that start eating my flesh and doing everything else to me. I mean, I was going down to see a friend who was in the hospital. She had a fallopian tube pregnancy. And I had my daughter with me. She was a child and a little baby. And a nurse had just come out of the hospital. And she said to me, "You're not taking that baby into the hospital, are you?" And I said, "Well, I had thought to do that. Yes, I'm going to go see a friend of mine." She goes, "Hospitals are terrible places. And she's a nurse that worked there." She goes, if there's nothing wrong with her, I wouldn't take her into the hospital." I said, "No problem." I told my wife at the time, I said, "You go in and see Patricia. I'm staying out here with Adriana." Because I figured if I'm not taking my baby in there, I'm not going in there, right? Because let's face it, what's it filled with? A lot of sick people, a lot of hurt people, a lot of hurting people, a lot of grieving people. And I couldn't believe that I hadn't already figured that one out in this situation, right?
Mm.
So what I'm talking about is, this is, for me, it's not a question of belief systems. It's not a question, do I believe in doctors? Do I do? I've seen over and over again that it's just like people that say, well, do you believe in God or do you not believe in God? And, why get sidetracked? I talk about trusting. I trust that this works because it's worked for me. I trust that there may be something that will work better, so I stay open. I trust that if I don't find anything better, then I'm going to keep doing what works best for me now. It's applying intelligence to everything that I do. It's about being mindful, about being conscious, about being aware. So all of that goes into my primal nature play, my entire comprehensive natural healing, body mind therapy, whatever it's called. I oftentimes call beyond therapy, right? Instead of therapy, right? Forget about therapy. I mean, because really what it's about is learning and discovery, experimenting and exploring. All of these things are fundamental to my life. And I found that that's what's led me to an incredible life where I have enjoyed it thoroughly for the last 44 years.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't really go to the doctor either. It's been a long time since I've been or even think to go. But yeah, same as you. They're good at like if you get in a car wreck, it's probably better to go to the hospital than you know than not. Something that we were talking about last time that I found interesting also, and I was wondering, like, so I was telling you that I'm turning 40 um, on April 27th, and I was telling you about like this new business partnership. I'm opening my gym, and you started getting into the numerology of that, and like from the numerology and like what it means like in the tarot, and I was wondering like how much does that affect like the other things that you do? Like I've heard that like a lot of our presidents or something, they'll use numerology. They'll wait until a certain date because of the numbers or the way the moon cycle or moon phase. I mean, something like even like our at the highest level, our um, political level, anyways, will use like numerology in their uh, like to like dictate like when they do things. So like does like numerology enter into like how many reps you do or how many like what day you might like do something or
No, no. See, for me, I find I told you when we'd had a conversation a few days ago that I have a background through my grandmother. She introduced me to a lot of esoteric subjects and organizations like the I Am Fellowship and Rosicrucians and the Golden Dawn and so on and so forth. So when I do numerology or the way I use it, it's just as another map. The tarot, the only way I use tarot is I use the Thoth deck. I don't use it like to foretell the future and so on and so forth. There's just they're both ways, in different ways, different mappings of conceptualizing life circumstances and situations and so on and so forth. And so if I never used either one of those again in my life would still be just fine. However, knowing them allows me to, if you will, create a frame, the beginning of a contextual framework within which to start to establish rapport with a person and glean from them what's significant. Some people, I talk about that and oh my God, they light up and they're immediately, they move into a teachable moment. Somebody else goes, oh, that stuff is nonsense, or it's the devil, or some other thing. Somebody else goes, hey, it's the devil. I love that. I'm a devil worshiper. I really don't care. It doesn't make any difference to me at all. I can approach it. I can use it. Different maps. I can use it, ignore it. It doesn't make any difference to me. Has it been valuable to me? Many, many things have been valuable to me that at one time in my life I thought were absolute nonsense. In many ways, I think that the way most people use many of these things are nonsense. But it doesn't mean that they can't be used sensibly, and that they can't be used in ways that can assist you at different times in your life. And so I always go by the motto, is it working for me now? And is it working well? In other words, how well is it working? Because I'm always open to something new, even if it's better than what I have, I'm open to it. But I'm also, even though I was born in California, I must have had past life in Missouri, because I'm always about show me, right? I mean, I've got to see that it works, because I've had people tell me stuff, especially in some of the Qigong masters, oh, they can do this and they can do that. Show me that, show me that. Drop me, with your energy without even touching me. You show me that. I'll sign a waiver, no problem. Stops my heart, good enough, no problem. So far, none of them have done that, right? So I don't like to tell people that I can do something I can't do. As a matter of fact, I don't want to tell them what I can do. I want to work with them in a co-creational way where we're both teaching and learning. We're coming in here as two human animals, or if it's a group of human animals, we have to find ourselves within this context. We have to find what it is that we want, and then we have to look.
Okay, I just restarted. I paused like 5 seconds ago, so there was just like I heard you say like show me, and then otherwise, if you can't prove it, like why? I think we got it all, but yeah, it.
Okay. Let me just finish up with this, because that we're breaking up a lot and stuff. So
Okay.
Let's finish with this concept. For me, working with an individual or working with a group, I'm looking for everyone's a participant in the process and how it unfolds. So it's not me smart, you stupid. It's not me expert, you novice. It is always a co-creative process for me. And I'm looking for that, and what else? Mutual benefit. It's got to be mutually beneficial. It's got to be a reciprocal relating, because that actually shapes the experience. And so for me, it's not that the ends justify the means. For me, it's the means shape the ends. So I come into it open and ready to share, teach, and learn. I come in with a Zen mind, a no mind, right? In other words, just I'm ready, a beginner's mind, it's sometimes called. I invite other people to do the same, to the degree that they're possible, that they're capable, that they're willing to. We then see, what can we do? What can we weave together to create something that's meaningful for both of us? So that when we separate from one session or from 10 years of working together, we walk away feeling, wow, that was a worthy journey that we did together.
Yeah.
So that living that way has made it where I have very few people who know me and regret knowing me, because if we don't get along, well, go somewhere else. I'll go somewhere else. I'm not going to make you wrong just because I no longer or could not find the good, the great, the grand, or the glorious while being with you. We're all people. We all have our own path. You know what? There's 8 billion some people on the planet. That means there's 8 billion paths, right? So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah. When you're saying like co-creators, there's I just finished listening to the audio version for the second time of Nietzsche. Thus spoke Zarathustra, and it's it's a really good book. But he has there's this part in it, and I even did a podcast by myself not too long ago called "Creators, the Creator Seeketh," or something like that. But it was just like I look around at my friends, and there are people that are doing stuff, they're creating stuff, and as a contrast, I stopped at I had a meeting with the person that I'm going into business with, and my friend that's doing our website. And so I'm leaving that so 2 people that are both very fit, very strong, getting after it. And then I go to the grocery store, and one of the first things I see is someone that's very, very overweight, and they're hanging over the cart. So they're not really pushing the cart as much as they are using the cart to support them. And they're just kind of falling forward, just slow enough that they don't fall. there's no like pushing of the cart. It's just like the cart's going forward because they're just falling into it. And, it's like, and then so that was like one of the first things I saw going in. And then I see somebody else. It's the same thing. They're extremely heavy, leaning on the cart because, they couldn't stand up straight and just walk through. And then I'm walking for a few more steps and I look over, same thing. Someone extremely heavy, leaning on the cart. And it's like, so part of me wants to like help those people. And then part of me is more like a preach to the choir kind of person. Like, do I want to be a motivator? Or like Paul, like somebody asked Pavel, like, what do you do to motivate people? It's like, nothing. What do you mean? He's like, so it's like part of me is like kind of thinks like that. Come to me when you're ready. Here's what we'll do. And, I'll cheer you on a bit, but I'm not like just trying to convince somebody to get going. And I kind of like was wondering if maybe I don't intentionally leave those people out. I've worked with people that are quite overweight, that have all kinds of problems. They can barely walk. I'll work with anybody, but then I kind of wonder like how could I present myself so I don't scare them? Because a buddy of mine told a buddy of his that I'm opening a gym, and I've met him a few times. I've met him a few times, and so he was like, "Oh, Ryan's opening a gym. Maybe you could go work with him." And he's like, "Oh no, I'm not ready for that yet."
Yeah,
and it's like,
well,
what sense does that make?
What you've said, though, you see, here's the thing. To work with people when they're not ready, when they're not in a teachable moment, is to waste your time and irritate them, right? And turn them off. I mean, how many times have people tried to get me to do something when I wasn't ready to do it? I mean, there's no sense. So, one of the things that it's in my book, like, I don't try and teach pigs to sing. It irritates the pigs and wastes my time, right? And it would be the same thing whether it was parrots or caribou. It doesn't really matter. What I'm saying is that when people are hungry for what I have, I can't turn them away. I had one of my clients comes up several times a year from Australia. Great guy. It took us 2 years of his contacting me over and over to where we could actually get a time when it worked for me in my schedule and worked for him in his schedule. And each time he comes up, we have a grand time. It's because he's ready. And he gets 2 sessions a day with me every day that he's here. It's either 2 with me or 2 with Coach Tara. And so, lots of times he'll do 2 with me on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and he'll do 2 with Tara on Monday and Friday. And then on the weekend, we split it up between us. People say, well, gosh, isn't that overtraining? Because, like my sessions seldom run an hour. They're usually like 2 or 3 hours when someone's coming that far. I mean, let's put it out there. So the thing is, though, he's ready. And is it overwhelming? Of course, it's overwhelming. It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot for your body, your mind, your spirit. However, what we're doing is a total immersion of the thing. And then he goes home and he has the time to integrate it, right? So that person is ready, so we can do that sort of thing. Somebody else might come. See, the way I do it, I interview people either on a Zoom or a Skype or a phone first. Then their first session, the first 30 minutes, there's no charge. Because person to person, that's where I can get the clearest reading. If at that point I feel like it and they feel like it, then we proceed onward and have a session. That way, there doesn't have to be any hard feelings. I have many times told people, your money's no good here. This is not the place for you. And I've had people argue with me. And early days, I used to give in sometimes. They would always end up disappointed because it wasn't the place for them. So I never do that now. If it's not right for me, it's not right, right? If it's not right for them, no matter how right it might be for me, it's not right. So when it's right for both of us, we got something to work with. Same thing when people come to workshops, right? So they can't come to a workshop that I do without having trained with me first. So I know who they are and they know who I am. Now, this is changing because in October, I'm going back with Kelly Manzone. She's setting up a training in double ball staff that myself and Coach Tara and the Buffalo Thief, Dr. M, are going to be assisting me with. And so we're not going to know, except through Facebook and YouTube, if even that, these people. So it's going to be an interesting phenomena, isn't it? Mm. We'll see all these people for the first time. Now, I'd actually done that, I take it back, once before when I was 40, twice actually. I went to England and taught there. But this has been the first.
I just hit pause again.
And I don't know what their capabilities are to have them for a day and a half and put it together. So whatever it turns out, that would be good.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be great. So you're going to, you said it's in Connecticut?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
it's going to be, we're going to be, putting it out, when we're still working. We've got the venue and stuff, but we're putting together she's putting all together that information. Like I told her, she invited me to do that. And I said, that's fine if you take care of all that kind of stuff. I'll show up and do the teaching. But as far as like doing all the, where do people stay and all that kind of stuff, that's not my bag. And she does it beautifully. I mean, man, she's on top of that kind of stuff. So she's doing that part of it. And it's going to be a day and a half, 8 hours the first day, and about 4, maybe 5 hours the second day. And it's going to be exclusively double ball staff work and body weight, because I've got my own systems of body weight flows that I teach. So we're going to use some of that to integrate with the double ball staff. And of course, again, understanding, working with principals, working with the understanding because the double ball staff works much differently than Indian clubs do, because you've got the ball is in your hand. And your timing, momentum, and digital dexterity, totally a major part of the picture. So it's going to be a fun training with 20 or 30 people and they're all, and including in the cost of the workshop, they'll walk away with a pair of double ball staffs. So I'm going to be showing single staff, double, and also one staff, 2 hands. Work with it. So it's going to be a joyous discovery all the way around. And I think because so many people have seen our stuff on YouTube and Facebook, that a really good crowd of people that will be simpatico. And of course, I'm going to do some things to help establish rapport so that we can, all make sure we're on the same page and then get on with the work. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm sure it will.
I'm sure it will.
Awesome. I was getting like a little feedback of myself. Yeah, I don't know why my audio is right now. Hopefully that stops. Yeah, well, we can. Wrap it up now. Is there anything else you wanted to go over before I let you go, or?
I did just, for me, I always just come right off the cuff with things and just, talk about whatever it is. And I'll tell you why, because you never know who's listening or who's watching. I've had the most unlikely people for 44 years turn out to be my best clients and students. Just male and female, young and old, tall and short. I mean, every kind imaginable. I didn't know there's so many kinds of people in the world, to tell you the truth. And so I do me. When someone comes to me, they do them, and we see whether or not there's a match where we can do some good work together so that we both walk away richer from it. So, I'm good, man. I've got nothing else to say, or I could go on for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's kind of how I am. I could just talk to you about this stuff forever, and I'd love to have you on again and dig into, whatever else. But so what's your how do people get a hold of you? What's your YouTube, your Instagram?
Yeah, okay. Well, so on YouTube now, my new channel is Zenkahuna, one word, Reloaded. So that'll take you to my videos. And by the way, there's going to be many more of those coming up over the next few months, because I've got 2 one-week-long road trips where it's nothing but just going to be making some great videos and stuff like that and enjoying the great outdoors. in the Western United States. And then during the summer, 10 weeks, baby. I take the whole 10 weeks, and from the middle of June to the end of August, I'm going to be out there and swinging and preaching and meeting folks and doing our thing. So we're putting up a lot of stuff on the Zenkahuna Reloaded. And of course, we'll also be doing it on my Facebook page. That's Rocannon MacGregor. I also have a second page, Zenkahuna Original. And then I'm on Instagram too. And I think that's a Zenkahuna. I don't do a whole lot on Instagram yet, but maybe this summer, this spring, I'll be doing more of that. So, you know, it takes a while. I tell you, I have so much fun doing all the other things I'm doing. Taking the time to put anything on the media, electronic media, and the internet and that sort of thing it's kind of I'm burning daylight doing something that isn't as significant to me, but I like to pass things forward, and that's why I do it. So there's that. And people, of course, on Facebook, they can also message me if they want, you know, to set up something where we can do, you know, if they want to come and train with me. And I do see people that come from out of state or out of country. I just had a guy from Croatia here recently, and so you know that's a possibility too.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, you're. It's good to see you, like, you're putting the stuff out again, because you were like one of the main guys that my buddy and I were watching when we were getting into kettlebells and Indian clubs 9-10 years ago, whatever it was, and so cool to see you, like, back at it and putting it out there. And thanks again for coming on the show. I'll stop the recording, and I'll talk to you for just a second after I hit stop.
Okay, sounds good, man. Thanks a lot.